All right, so good evening again. So as the board had asked during our previous meeting, we reconvened the Facilities Planning Committee to reprioritize what really we thought were the most essential aspects of the project. And we did that at our first meeting with nearly 100 community members in attendance, and then shared those results and came up with a plan during our last meeting with nearly 50 community members in attendance. I do want to stress that the work of this committee that started well over 2 years ago, those committee members were fiscally responsible throughout the process. During the initial phase of that, we met with the financial advisor who advised us we could spend up to $22.5 million and still remain tax neutral. Other options they gave us were $19.5 million and $16.5 million. And despite those possibilities existing, the committee brought forward a $14 million project to the Board of Education. Again, they had the opportunity to spend more, but instead they just included aspects that they thought were essential into that project. So I do want to recognize the work that went in prior to the unfortunate defeat of that. So this is just a quick overview of how this process works for our schools. Building condition survey is a state mandatory survey, must be conducted by architects every 5 years. So actually our 2020 survey is now up, so we'll be doing another one this spring. That leads to the development of a 5-year improvement plan. In Putnam Valley, we are lucky to have amazingly talented staff members. So anything in that plan that we can do in-house, we do in-house. And I promise you it's more than any other district around us does, just considering the staff that we have. If we're unable to do it in-house, the first thing we do is look to make it part of our operating budget and contract it out to a local contractor. Again, amazingly talented local contractors who will come in and do a fantastic job at a very reasonable price for us. And then what happens is if we can't do it in-house and it's too much for a local contractor to do, then we're forced to that last piece, which is a capital project. Now, there are 3 ways in which we could fund capital projects. One is through a bond, another is through our capital reserve, and the final is through a transfer to capital. Those are the only 3 mechanisms we have to accomplish these capital improvement projects and still receiving the state aid. The state aid is obviously a huge driver. Right now, we currently receive 66% of all expenses back in state aid. So as we mentioned, the initial bond vote, the results was defeated by 42 votes. On 2/26, we reconvened the Facilities Planning Committee. We reprioritized what was in the project. On 3/12 last evening, we met again and came up with a new scope for the project, and here we are on the 13th to present those findings to the Board of Education. This is a quick summary of the prioritization that each of the groups did during our first meeting. Each group was asked to identify their highest 3 priorities and what they thought were the lowest 3 priorities. As you can see, just like some of our students, some of our adults don't always follow directions, but we did the best we could. So this just captures everything that was submitted on the chart paper. This is the final tables. And at the end of the evening, the community priorities, so those that are receiving the most votes in the top 3, was the high school, middle school parking lot and retaining wall. I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone. The elementary school geothermal, the high school roof, and the elementary school playground, and high school accessibility in the courtyard. The items that received the most votes on the lower end of the spectrum was the fitness dance studio, the performing arts lights, the elementary school library, and the middle school all-room instructional space. So if we take the budgetary numbers that were set for those spaces, that comes up to a total of $1,025,000 if we remove those 4 items from the project. Now it's important to note that of that $1 million, $660,000 of it would have been covered by the state. So the true savings to the district by eliminating these 4 things is $340,000. So this is just a quick visual of what that updated proposal would include. So those 4 aspects of the project have been removed from this flyer. And this is just sort of a 1-page visual as to what would still be included. Now, one of the complicating factors that arose during our conversation is this idea of timing and escalation. Throughout the winter, we discussed the importance of voting in the winter to keep us on a timeline to start the work in the summer of 26, or the entire project was built and budgeted based upon that start date. So if that was still a possibility, our new project would be $12,975,000 with a summer of 26 start date. But what we know is many of the aspects of this project will not begin on the summer of 26, and instead will start in the summer of 27. The graphic on the right is the Turner Building Cost Index, and this is sort of the industry standard to predict escalation costs in construction. And for the escalation costs for this year is predicted to be 4%, so that it would add another $519,000 back into the project. Just because over that year, from the summer of 26 to summer of 27, union contracts go up, labor costs go up, material costs go up. So there's a wide range of factors that factor into that escalation cost. So this is what part of the conversation that the board is going to have this evening. What we don't know is, so that would raise the project cost, that whole $519,000 would raise the cost back up to $13,494,000. Now the unknown is, and we won't know this for some time, is what aspects of this project can we begin before the summer of 27? Maybe the most straightforward one would be the drilling of the geothermal wells. That work can happen while students are in school. That we can close that field, provide them access to that space in our campus, and still be able to do that work, maybe starting in the fall of 26. But much of the work cannot be done. I can't tear up and pave a parking lot while there's buses coming and going each day. I can't replace the roof of an occupied building. So lots of that work is likely going to push back to the summer of 27. So one of the things the board's going to need to decide, if they do decide to move forward with this project, is how much of that $519,000 do we want to budget for escalation, and how much do we want to sort of risk or hope we can get started sooner than later. One of the other topics we spoke a lot about last evening was our communication strategy. So this slide just captures all of the ways in which we communicated the first project, electronically, in person, paper, and social media. So all of these will continue. I won't bore you reading it since most of you heard it last evening. But these are some of the new ways, based upon the feedback we've received, that we plan to better communicate regarding the potential new project. Rather than one mailing that goes out to all residents of Putnam Valley, we're planning to send 3. That includes a postcard sent to every address in Putnam Valley, a trifold sent to every address, and the budget and bond newsletter, again, sent to every address. So residents have 3 times the likelihood of seeing something come through their physical mail than they did last time, where we only sent a single mailer to all residents. Again, all residents, not just parents of Putnam Valley students. Signage will continue the use of our electronic boards. We'll rehang the banner on the 4 corners. We'll install wood signs on some of our more trafficked areas, and the district is looking to purchase yard signs, again, as another way to make sure all community residents are aware of the upcoming vote. Social media platforms will continue to use Facebook, Instagram, X. We've already started to create short video clips, news stories, and other ways in which to get information, short snippets of information directly to community members. To talk about the retaining wall, we're going to give them a quick shot and narrative about the retaining wall. We're going to talk about the roof. We're going to send poor Dan up on the roof to record a quick little video and then do a narrative over it so everyone could see exactly what these things are and what the importance is for them to get done. And obviously we'll continue to hold additional community meetings, listening hours, any group that's willing to take us in and hear a little bit about us, we would be happy to oblige, even the fire department. We spoke a lot about the financial factors that drive this. State aid, as we mentioned earlier, 66% of the project will be funded. So based upon that $12 million, we anticipate getting a little over $8.5 million minimum state aid we would get back. It's important to note that if we start performing or conducting these projects outside of a capital improvement, we would lose that aid. So $1 million of work will cost us $1 million, or it'll cost us $340,000, depending on whether or not we follow the rules to access that state aid. Capital Reserve Fund is something that the district set up many years ago. The voters approved 10 years up to $10 million. There's currently a balance of $7 million in there. A majority of that was deposited in that account in the last 2 years. 2 years ago, there was $2.5 million. That's when this work started. That was the balance at the time. So it's been able to grow over time, but that can only be accessed for capital improvements, and it can only be accessed with voter approval. So we cannot touch that money without voter approval, and we cannot utilize that money for anything other than improving our facilities. So our current plan is to use 36% of those capital reserves to support this project. We also have retiring debt. So the final piece of this puzzle is an existing bond that we're paying off. Community members are already part of their taxes. So our hope is to continue to make those payments as a way to offset this new project. With the onset of the capital, with the tax levy cap, it doesn't allow school districts to continually make improvements to their buildings. So in the past, if a roof of the high school went, we would say, we're really sorry, this year our taxes are gonna go up 6%, we need to fix the roof, next year they'll go back down. That's an impossibility now. So now districts are forced to schedule this work, part of our 5-year plan, to coincide with retiring debt. So now's an opportunity where we could do work where it's not gonna cost the taxpayers more money. If 2 years from now we try to do this work, there's no way for us to do it without saying, I'm sorry, your taxes are gonna go up if you approve this bond. So we're not unique in the school district in timing these projects. If Dave Spittle were here, he could already tell you what's on our next list of items. I know the elementary school roof above the first grade wing is set to be replaced probably 7 years from now, another 5 years before the next debt retires. So for anyone who's still here, you can project that. But that's the amount of time, the planning that goes into this. So a quick breakdown, $12,970,000 plus whatever escalation the board wants to put in there. The district expects to receive a minimum of $8,500,000 back in state aid. Those are both principal costs. Obviously, with interest, the project cost will go up, but with interest, so does our building aid. So both those numbers will vary based upon what the interest rate is. The higher the interest rate is, the more aid we get back. The higher the interest rate is, the more we pay for the project. The $2.5 million of capital reserve comes off the top, so that money is never bonded and no interest is paid on it. And that remaining sort of $1.975 million is what the community is being asked to cover, and that they're covering it through by continuing to pay their tax bills and continuing to contribute to the debt payment that's already existing. Because we lowered the scope of the project that was tax neutral, this new project, if it were to stay at $12,975,000, would actually be a tax decrease of $2.13 for an average value home of $415,000. That's not my number, that's the number we were provided. I know many people live in homes that are more expensive than $415,000, but if you do live in a home that's exactly $415,000, $2.13 would be what you would expect to save each month after approving this project. Some of the quick financial facts. These aren't numbers that we make up in isolation. We consult with fiscal advisors, bond counsel, auditors, architects, and the New York State Building Facilities Department must approve not only the scope of our work, but also the finances. If State Education Department doesn't think we have enough money budgeted to complete the work, they will reject our project, and we will get no aid on it. So we have to send them both our budget as well as the scope of work that needs to be completed. Project costs cannot exceed voter approved amount. This isn't a public works project where the $100 million bridge costs $1 billion by the time they're done building it. We would have a really narrow bridge for that cost $100 million if that was the case, because we cannot exceed what the voter approved amount is. So rest assured that a $12,975,000 project will cost under $12,975,000, or it won't happen. Taxes are not a percentage of your home's assessed value. There was a long conversation last evening about this, and I will show a graphic that helps demonstrate that. The school's maximum tax levy is capped by New York State, so New York State limits how much we can tax, which forces us to use these funds for capital improvements. I spoke about the capital reserve only being utilized for projects. Once we receive state aid approval, the state aid is guaranteed. There's a fear of what happens if the state goes broke and the district doesn't get the money we're expecting. Well, in order for us to start the project, we need approval. In order for us to get approval, we're locked in for that state aid. So that's not something that we have to worry about. We only borrow the funds necessary to complete the project. So the project maximum amount is $12,975,000. It's not to say the project will cost $12,975,000. If we can get it done for $11 million, we only ever borrow $11 million. There's not an extra $2 million laying around waiting to be used. We borrow money. It's called short-term borrowing, bond anticipation notes. So as we have to pay contractors for the work they've completed, we borrow a little bit of money. We borrow a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. When the project's done, we take all of those small loans, wrap it up into one big one, and finance that over 15 years. The same 15 years that we get the state aid back on. So think about, you get a bill every month to pay off your debt, and you get a check every month deposited into your account that helps you pay off that. So that's sort of the balance that happens between state aid and the project bond cost. So we talk a lot about estimates. All of the estimates that we use are budgetary numbers. They're based upon per square foot. They're based upon industry standards. We don't have individual contractors come price out the project because we don't have the plans they need to do so. In order for an electrician to come in and price out a project, they would need to see what the architectural drawings, engineering plans are for that project in order to make it a decision. Those things cost lots of money and take lots of time, something that we don't have without voter approval. So we must get voter approval. Those budgetary numbers are what guide us, but ultimately the project will cost as little as possible. Whoever's willing to do that work for the least amount of money and can meet all the criteria we have for our contractors, that's who gets the contract. So we may have $100,000 budgeted for something. Someone could come in and say, I'll do that for 25. We'll say, high five, you get the job. So it's not, we don't want to advertise how much we're willing to spend for each of these components, which is why we're hesitant to put these numbers out there. Every contractor would love to know what's the maximum amount of money I could charge for this project. But really what we want is competition. We want many contractors interested in this because competition is going to drive down the price, and we want the person who's going to do it quality job for the least amount of money. And as time passes, we know each component of this project will become more expensive as the escalation costs continue to drive. Nobody pays less for anything as years go by. So we spoke a little bit about, we go from conceptual to bid prices. We don't really know the final cost of the project until after the project is complete. But we do know it cannot exceed what our maximum allowable amount is. These are two actual tax bills for two actual homes in Putnam Valley. We did this analysis on 12, but 12 didn't fit on the slide. So one of the things you'll notice, there's been a lot of conversation about assessed values of homes in Putnam Valley. Not my cup of tea. I'm not responsible for that. But you can see this home on the top from 2017 to 2024. It's gone from a value of $313,000 to $523,000. I guess that's a good thing if they ever want to sell their house. But you'll notice, if you look to the right, their school taxes over those years have gone up $250, $240, $120, and so forth. And on the far right column, you'll see that's a percentage of their home value paid in school taxes. So one thing that you notice is as the value of your home goes up, the percentage of your home value you pay in school taxes actually goes down. So where 2024, 2.01%. If you go look at the house on the bottom, right, went from $245,000 to $344,000, so a house with a lower assessed value. But you notice those percentages are exactly the same. As the home value went up, the percentage of their home value they pay in taxes went down. And so they went up $100, $100, $130, $280, and they went from 2.57% to 2.01%. There's a lot of concern of this flat tax. So if the 2.66 was the value of everyone's home, the percentage of everyone's home they paid in school taxes, so if that first home was 2.66 every year, that top number would be $13,900. So it would be another $3,400 more in taxes they would be paying if that percentage didn't go down with the increase in assessed value. So that's just an example of when I keep saying that it's not a direct percentage. It's always a percentage, but a percentage changes each year. And as I mentioned before, Putnam Valley is not unique in terms of school districts in our area that seek these opportunities to bond money. So Putnam Valley, we had a vote on 125. We were tax neutral for $14 million, and everyone's aware it was defeated by 42 votes. Haldane had a vote in November for $28 million, which included a tax increase, and it passed 724 to 445. Lakeland had a vote in September, It passed $57 million. It was tax neutral, 444 to 173. You'll notice that nobody has nearly as many voters as we do. Brewster, 82 million tax increase passed. Yorktown, 57 million tax increase passed. Ossining, $210 million tax neutral passed. Peekskill had 2 that passed. Harrison, Croton. Pleasantville is the only other one on here. They had a tax increase, so it was going to cost taxpayers more money. And they were introducing the one thing that nobody wants, which is new lights around their turf fields, which are not popular. If anyone's looking to do those, be careful. And I know that Pleasantville is currently working on a proposition that does not include lights that I'm sure they will put back up for vote as well. So obviously every school district's in the same boat that we are. The ability to just continually do this work year over year is not a possibility. And people wait for these opportunities to capitalize on retiring debt. So anything that's tax neutral, that's exactly why they did it the way they did, because they had retiring debt they were looking to reinvest in. And just again, our total project cost minus the capital reserve minus the state aid and the retiring fund would equal a slight decrease in school taxes. So that's what I have for the presentation. I apologize for everyone who heard it again last evening, but an opportunity for the board to discuss. I guess 1 is the scope of the project. 2 would be the escalation cost that we want to add back into that project. And I think 3 would be, I think the consensus would be if the project goes back up for a vote, that vote would happen alongside our budget vote on May 20th. Questions, comments, discussion?
Well, I think it's imperative that we put it back up for a vote, including the, the items that were taken out need to remain out of the mix. There's always that expression, we have to take care of what we need, what we really need, and we need a new roof on the high school. We need that parking lot and that collapsing retaining wall to be fixed. We need the boiler at the elementary, which is over 20 years old, that could fail at any moment. God forbid if it ever happened in the winter. We need that replaced. And we need a nurse's office that is contemporary. And I made a joke the last time we were here that you could put a plaque on the front of that and it would represent a nurse's office from the 1950s, 1960s. There's no isolation room. There's no ventilation, really, that is appropriate for, God forbid, another pandemic or anything like that. So these are all necessities. This board was unified in putting up the original bond. We all believed that every single item there was needed. But the community has spoken, and they spoke very loudly. And we have to hear that, and we can't ignore that. So the current proposal, Dr. Luft, that the committee, facilities committee, has put together, especially through the last meeting, deciding, the top items, the bottom items, I think is a go, and we need to get that on the May vote as quickly as possible. As far as escalation, I go with your 4%. I think that's a wise number for escalation costs, unless our financial advisors recommend something else. But in talking and researching a little bit on my own, 4% seems pretty adequate. There's a lot of fear of the tariffs with aluminum and steel, components of some of the things we might need, wood also. But those tariffs aren't going to last very long. I really believe that. I believe that there will come a unification of common goals between Canada, Mexico, Europe, China, and ourselves. And I think it's a negotiating tactic. That's my own personal belief. So the 4% I think would be good to go. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
I have some comments. I do want to mention that I think that everything that the facilities committee brought to the table was necessary. You keep seeing things like needs. I do think it's all needed. In public education, we're here for all of our students. So while people think that maybe the playground is low priority, we need to be able to provide for students who are young, for students who are disabled. Every student deserves the same ability to have these things. So while some students play baseball and really want a fantastic baseball field, we have other students who do dance and IB dance, and they also need a place to be able to practice. So while I do understand that the taxpayers don't want these things, and I do want to take them off the table and listen to the taxpayers, I want to mention that I think they're necessary, and that unfortunately, with the capital budget going down, we are going to have to put these things into the operating budget in order to provide the same opportunities for all of our students. So the unfortunate part about that is we're not going to get 66% back on the improvements that we're going to have to make through our working budget. And that's a bummer. And
Either that or another capital project,
Yeah.
which you can do through the budgetary process, include one of them as we did the high school roof originally. So that can be done. I agree with you. All the
Yeah,
things we agreed on were necessary,
I think that I agree with this, that
but we have to listen.
that looking over all of the data, and I do appreciate all of the facilities, the people that came, the people who may not have voted yes the first time. I really appreciate hearing those things that they didn't think should be included in this vote. I agree that with what was proposed here of the things that we should take out, and I think that we should put it back up in May. And I just want to really reiterate that we're only voting down that no. We're really only now saving $500,000 because we have to wait. So I just hope people, think about that in the future. And now we're going to have to wait to fix the roof and the instruction and everything else too. So just my thoughts.
Yeah. So I agree with both of you, and I think that we have to find some sort of middle ground, right, between listening to a portion of the community that, loves Putnam Valley so much that they don't ever want to leave it, and they want to be able to live here forever. And taxes going up for whatever reason make that very, very challenging for some people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a parent of 3 children in every school in this district, and I feel very strongly that as we sit on the board, we represent every single child in this district, every single family, not only the ones that are here, the ones that have passed through, and the ones that are to come. And I think that we must have that forward thinking of ensuring that not only that our buildings are safe, but that our kids have the very best that we could possibly give them in our community. And I think that that's got to be a shared vision in our community as far as wanting to give our children, who are literally the leaders of tomorrow, I'm not going to sing the Whitney Houston song right now, but they are the future. And so we want to make sure that we pour into them, and that we, to your point, Sasha, pour into all of them. There may be a future Rockette sitting in our building right now. There may be a future airplane pilot sitting in our building that's going to use the VR tools that we have to figure out that he wants to be a pilot, right? We have to be able to support every one of our families in the very best way. And that's not always going to be easy, and it's not always going to happen perfectly. We know that. But again, to Sam's point, we have to listen to our community as well. So we've been racking our brains, trying to figure out what does that middle ground look like. And I want to thank every person that has come out in the last couple of weeks to those facilities meetings, because your presence mattered. The collaboration mattered. I certainly learned some things from people that I was sitting across from a table at that I had never met before, who had a different perspective on not necessarily the items that were proposed, but how they were proposed, with not fully understanding the why, right? When you see a nurse's suite, you just think that, maybe Putnam Valley just wants to be impressive with their spaces. Well, no, actually that space really needs to get done, because it's not a safe space right now for children who are not well, or for children who perhaps are totally fine, but they go to the nurse's office to get a Band-Aid. We don't want them walking out of the nurse's office with the flu, right? So it's important that we take care of those spaces in that way, and that we communicate well with our community. So I will say my piece of this right now, the one that I'm really, really happy to see, is that the district is making a concerted effort to be able to communicate in a different way. Not that we weren't communicating before. I think we were. I think that we've had a lot of discussion in the last couple of days, weeks, months, of how do we communicate differently and better and to all. Putnam Valley has a very wide range of community members. Some members who don't own a computer, some members who that's all they do all day is they look at the computer or their phone for information, right? And so we've got to meet all of those needs as far as communication goes. And so I'm really happy to see the way in which we're going to be communicating with families, with community members, because all of it matters. I also want to say that the recent push from the district on social media also matters. If you've been following social media from the district lately, you've seen many more posts of what our kids are actually doing. It has to be contextualized. The work has to be contextualized in what it actually does for children. And you do that through showing what kids are doing on a regular basis in the high school, in the middle school, and in the elementary school, on the field, on the stage. All of it matters. And that's what this work is for, so that they can continue to engage in those particular activities and learning opportunities, right? And so I'm super excited that the district is making that effort. My hope is that the community will really start to have a deeper understanding of the amazing work that happens here, and the reason why we are lobbying to give our students and staff the spaces they need to be able to do their job. It's a need. And so, I do support us making those changes because we want to listen to our community. And as a good faith effort, we want to show that. That is the reason why every year we come below the tax cap, is to show that good faith of we don't want to max out our community members. We don't want them to feel stressed. We want everybody who wants to stay here to be able to, at the same time as providing the needs for our children. So thank you, everybody, for your hard work.
Joanne? No, go ahead.
I don't have a lot of different things to say than that everyone else said. I'm disappointed the vote went down. I've loved what was in it. I think it is all needs. I would love to put the same vote up, but we have to listen to the taxpayers. And they said, Joe said, failed vote. We had a failed vote. We need to listen to those votes and readjust as necessary, although that does hurt. As an individual, I would love to put up the same one. But as a board working for our community, we have to make some concessions here, I think. Or I think that we should consider that. Joe did bring up a good point regarding taking out additional funds to go over the costs, and I think that was a good point. I'm just curious how, from additional funds in the reserve to go over the increased costs that we're going to exhibit. So I'm curious everyone's thought on that also.
On
increase to
raising the
2.5?
cost of the project to
He
include
said
the,
take out $500,000 more from the capital reserve due to the increase from now to 27.
so is that
So,
right? You wouldn't put it as part of the project? We would,
Yeah, part of our conversation this evening was how much escalation costs we wanted to add into the project, not knowing what work would be accomplished within the existing escalation estimates versus what would be essentially a year later than what was budgeted for. So if we assume the entire project gets pushed back a year, then we estimate it being $519,000 of escalation costs. Yeah.
it's a good point, Joe.
Yeah. Unfortunate. It's unfortunate. Yeah.
So we're essentially getting less and paying more.
Correct.
Correct.
I just want to make it clear, because one of the challenges here is that funding that's based in schools is very challenging to understand. It does not work the same way it works when you are improving your home. And in this instance, while I see the silver lining in this process, I really do. I think there's a lot of good that's going to come out of the process that we've gone through since the vote failed. And our district will be better for it, as will, I believe, our community. It's costing us more money to do less work. And I think that that has to be something considered, especially when in the past, our regular general budget vote has only passed by 4%. And I think that that really needs to be a message that our community hears. We need everyone to please vote. Regardless of how you vote, please just come out and cast your ballot. And if you can't do that, please get an absentee ballot if you possibly can, because your voice matters. And it's evident that your voice matters because, like we said, the board is listening to the community. But we want to make sure it's the entire community's voice that's being represented in the vote. So as parents, as community members, as board members, as people who love this amazing community, we've got to go out and encourage people to cast their ballot. It's not just a presidential election that matters. Every election matters. Every vote matters. And so please, if you're listening to this video tonight, if you're here tonight, go and grab 10 parents to just come out and vote, or 10 community members that maybe weren't able to do that. Encourage them to let their voice be heard, so that then we can really see what the entire community is really looking to do.
I have a question about, just want to clarify what you said. Are you proposing that the new budget that we put up, I think that the one that the district presented is actually a great summary of everything that people said. So I looked through all the tables, I think it's great. Are you suggesting, based on the feedback what Joe said, basically, that we add $500,000 to this budget
From the reserve.
from the reserve?
From the reserve.
From the reserve.
So increase from basically 2.5 to 3 from the reserve.
But it
Is
wouldn't
what
be
we're
that
saying?
much money, because as our costs increase, the state aid increases. So we wouldn't be
Yeah.
looking at the full 500,000, because I'm always leery about pulling money from the reserve.
Right.
That's our
That's our
backup,
savings
you know?
account, right.
God
Can we even
forbid
do that?
something happens.
Yes.
It would be more like, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Luft, somewhere maybe 300,000.
So if the project cost were to go up 500,000, we would still get 66% of that money back in aid.
I would disagree with taking out more from our capital reserve.
Yeah,
I would not want
I-
to do that. I hope that the budget is a good budget, and that it wouldn't, like, that our costs wouldn't go over it.
Yeah,
I think that
I
we
agree
would
with
lose
you,
out
Sasha.
on money
Yeah.
if it came in lower, like, if we had extra funds
Yeah,
from.
I agree with that. Leave it as
I'm
is,
explaining that well.
and don't
That's why
pull
we
any
have
more from the
discussions.
reserve. I'm leery about
Yeah, I think
taking
we
from
keep
the
the
reserve.
2.5.
You know,
And
the
Grace
irony of this whole thing.
Last
I'm
night,
sorry.
Grace
Yes,
really
I was just going to say
explained
that.
Yeah.
Yep.
why it's important to leave money in
In the
the
reserve,
reserve,
yeah,
so that
I
our,
agree.
Yes,
our
that too.
ratings, our bond, and our interest
Correct.
is lower, because
You-
we
you
have
don't wanna
money in
mess with that
savings.
reserve.
Yes.
The irony of this whole thing is that even if we were to include everything that was voted no on, everything, we'd still have that escalation cost. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So that's the sad part of this. But let's deal with what we have, and I think the recommendations from the Facilities Committee, Dr. Luft, and all involved is a solid one, and hopefully it will pass this time. In my mind, and I can't tell people how to vote, just come out and vote. We're going to be reimbursed of our tax money that's been up in New York, usually, sent down to New York City or Buffalo or Rochester, but never back to here. We're actually going to get 66% of the costs back from our taxes that have been going to New York and never helping our town. Well, this is going to come back royally to help our town. So for me, it's simple. Those are the facts.
Barbara? Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the speakers last night at the meeting said, and Dr. Luft referenced, that all of our groups did not follow the directions to pick the 3 priority items and the 3 lower priority items, because it was really hard to pick
Yeah.
3. The Facilities Committee had already gone through a list of, 100 items to formulate the list that we put up, and all of them were essential for a group of students, for future students, for the community, for safety, for whatever. But all of them were essential. And to say that these are the 3 we think are less essential, essential means it means essential. And I'm sorry that work will probably still have to be done, and the burden or the cost of those projects will be borne 100% by our taxpayers, instead of only 33%. But that was the way the voters indicated, and so we, out of respect for that, we cut the scope of the project down, and I think that the suggestions that the Facilities Committee made and that Dr. Luft and his financial advisors have suggested is a good compromise. And I would agree to put 4% into the cost of
I
the
agree.
escalation cost.
Yeah.
So one thing that's important to note, even if we were to add that 4% into the escalation cost of the project, it'll still ultimately be a tax decrease. So maybe it'll be, I mean, I'll make up a number, rather than $213, maybe it's $1.73, right? But we're never gonna go back to the original project cost of 14 million. So that was tax neutral, so anything less than 14 million without touching any of the other finances
less,
would still
yeah.
be considered a
Right.
decrease in taxes as it
Right.
relates to this project. I'm not telling you your taxes are going to go down overall. What I'm saying is that this project will actually result in lower taxes
Yeah.
than it would otherwise be.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
All right,
And
thank
we're
you
gonna
all.
vote tonight on this?
No, so what our plan is, it sounds like we have a consensus, which is really what we need. We'll prepare a resolution, we'll have a resolution ready to go for the next meeting.
Excellent.
And that still puts us on the timeline to be able to vote on May 20th.
Great.
What about that mailer that was mentioned last night that's supposed to go out in March?
Yeah, we're already working on a save the date mailer. That's really just the date, how to get registered to get more information, sign up for our electronic newsletters. So we don't need the project details in that. The next two communications will have more details on the project. What that'll have is a link to our website, which is the easiest way for individuals to get details on the project anyway.
Excellent.
Is this presentation on the website too?
It will be,
or going-
yes.
Will be? Okay.
Can we also add to the mailer information about early voting or
And
absentee
voting,
voting?
Not the one maybe in March?
Not the postcard.
Maybe
Postcard would
closer?
be
But you
difficult.
can't, the problem is
Difficult all that.
when you could sign up, but we definitely will share that information in every way possible. At least, even if it's just letting people know that it's going to be available and this is how they would access it.
Yeah, something as simple as look into absentee voting, if you cannot be here that day, because we understand
Or if you
people
have
leave.
children who are in college who can't
like-
be in there, here that day.
Yeah,
Right.
we get it. People leave really early, they come back late, like, I'm a working parent, I get it. But there are other ways to vote, so that's a really great opportunity for people. We just want to make sure that they have that information, so.
Now, what about the Facilities Committee? Are we calling them back at all for anything, or have they done their work, or what?
So I think right now we are, what we did is we had individuals sign up for subcommittees. So we're having a communications subcommittee that will continue to meet to make sure we're maximizing our outreach to the community. And we have a finance subcommittee that'll be formed, and their job is to help collect financial questions and then disseminate financial information about the project back out to the community. So that'll sort of be the work of that community members who sign up for those subgroups moving forward.
And you'll send that out to everybody that was like at the...
Yeah, I mean, anybody who was there last evening had an opportunity to sign up, but anyone who's out there and is interested in signing up would certainly be welcome. We wouldn't turn anyone away.
Good.
All right,
Thank you.
Okay.
thank you. So that concludes the facilities presentation.